Good evening, men. Thank you for joining me tonight for this broadcast on authentic manhood principles. We call it AMP, authentic manhood principle. And here what we do, we try and discuss and unpack things that are going to help you as a man to live a life that is real, a life that is significant, a life that is strong, and a life that is successful. We do not believe, and I do not believe, that there is any man that was fashioned for failure. You are formed for the battles of life as a man. You are created to be a conqueror as a man, and you are incubated and fashioned in such a way that hardwired within you is the capacity to live life at the frequency of significance, at the level of authenticity, and at the level of realness as a man. Being a man that is real is what being a real man is all about. And in this conversations that we have here, we try and challenge you to rise up to the mountaintop of significance so that you don't die in the valley of insignificance as a man. And so last week we started interesting conversations that we are calling the fight of your life, the fight of your life. And we began by understanding that the masculine life is a battle. It is not a playground, it is a battleground. There is a battle that you must face as a man. There are things that will come against you as a man. They will try to undermine your identity. They will try to undermine your masculinity. They will attempt to try to make you feel like you're not a man enough, like you don't have what it takes to be a conqueror and to be a victorious man in the journey of life. And these are things that face every man. There is no man that is exempted from the battles of life. And we began to say that there is a fight for your identity as a man. There is an attempt to dent your identity so that it is obscured and so that you forget that you are created to be a man of strength and as a man of significance. There is a battle to undermine your character. There is a battle to steal your integrity away from you and to cause you to be a man that does not live in the space of integrity and in the space of ethics. The battle to compromise you and to mar your soul with sin and compromise and things that will undermine the expression of your strength as a man. Then number 3, we say there is a battle to muzzle the expression of your greatness. And life is not a friendly place for men. You know, life is adversarial. Life is fashioned in such a way that you don't conquer if you're not a fighter. You don't conquer if you're not a man that is given to the art of battle and the art of being a warrior. And so we began by just trying to unpack a few things about what you need to know about the fight of your life as a man. And so I say that there are 5 battles that you must win as a man, and today I'm going to be addressing the first battle that you must win as a man, and that is the battle of fear. Because every man is created not to live in timidity and inferiority and in insignificance. Every man is created to live a life of boldness, a life where you slay this monster called fear and you live from a place of courage and strength as a man. And that is what I'm going to try to unpack for us tonight in our broadcast. Let me invite you once again, as I always do, to invite your friends to join us so that they can enjoy some of the insights that we're going to be sharing tonight. Before I get into just the inner dynamics of how we are supposed to slay fear, let me make a few comments about fear and men and how fear relates with our fight and our victories as men. Number 1, let me just help you understand, as I help myself as a man to understand, that fear is a monster that every man faces, and every man must slay this monster of fear if he is going to live a life of strength, success, and significance. Fear is a monster. Fear is not a friend. Fear is not an ally. Fear is an enemy to destiny, and fear is not something that will allow you to live up to your full potential as a man. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the voices of your fears, you will never be able to be a voice of significance in life as a man. Your ability to be a voice and not an echo in life is determined by your ability to conquer your fears, to face the monster of fear and refuse to open the door of your heart to it, so that your heart becomes a place that incubates courage and not a place where the monster called fear is allowed to penetrate and control your life. The comment number 2 that I want to make is that between you and the royal place of your masculinity in destiny as a man, there are fears that will attempt to stop you. Any man will have to muzzle and conquer his Goliath before he can sit on his throne of power and authority as a man. And so the comment number 2 is that between you and the royal place that you need to live in as a man, and that royal place is that place of significance, that place of strength, and that place of success. Between you and that place, there is a monster called fear that will attempt to stop your entry into that place. The third comment that I want to make is that the crown of greatness will never fit on the head of the coward. Your head is designed to carry the crown of greatness, but that crown will be contested by the monster of fear. Anytime you allow cowardice and timidity to control your heart and to control your life and to control your moves as a man, then you will never sit on the place of significance and you will never wear the crown of greatness. Show me a great man and I will show you a man that defied his fears and rose above the intimidation around him, so that the crown of greatness can fit on their head. Most men are not stopped by the obstacles around them. They are stopped by the fears they have allowed to take residence and to take root in their hearts. And fear is something that will take root in your heart if you allow it, if you give it permission. And so you must be cautious that fear is an enemy that wants to wrestle the destiny of royalty out of your hands as a man. And there's an interesting verse of scripture that I find in 1 John 4:18 that tells us exactly what fear does in the lives of men. And in 1 John 4:18, part B of that verse, it says, fear is crippling. A fearful life is one that is not yet fully formed. What does that mean? Number one thing that happens in the life of a man is that fear will cripple the ability of a man to make momentum and progress towards optimized masculinity as a man. There is no man that is controlled by fear that will ever fulfill his destiny. You cannot scale the mountain of masculine greatness when your heart is bowed down in fear. Fear is a crippler, and there is no greater cripple than the man that is crippled by fear. As a matter of fact, to be crippled by polio or one of these sad natural causes that cripple people is not as bad as being crippled by fear. Because when you're crippled by a disease, that is something external that is crippling you. But when you're crippled by fear, it means that you've allowed something internal to cripple and to muzzle your courage as a man. So fear will cripple you and it will tamper with the formation of your masculinity. We are born as boys, but we must be formed into men. And how we become formed into men is when we defy our fears, when we counter our fears, when we rise up and challenge our fears and refuse to be slaves of intimidation. That is the only way we are able to rise up and to make a journey of masculinity that is well formed. A life that is controlled by fear is a masculine expression that is deformed. Show me a man that is controlled by fear, and I will show you a man that is deformed and a man that is dysfunctional. So how does fear deform us and emasculate us as men? Number one, I want you to notice, and I call them the 3 P's of that emasculate us as men through the spirit of fear. Number one, fear is poison. Fear contaminates the pool of your courage and causes the expression of your authenticity to be muzzled. Anytime you allow fear to control you, one of the things that happens is that the pool of courage within you is contaminated. The genes of your greatness are tampered with. The genes of your significance are tampered with. And so fear is a poison in the pool of masculinity. Fear knocks the door of your heart, but when you open and you let it in, then you have allowed yourself to live a life that is contaminated contaminated, and a life that is not just contaminated by fear, but a life that is contaminated by smallness and pettiness and mediocrity. Fear is a poison. It will contaminate the pool of your courage. Number two, fear is a prison. Fear not only is a poison, it is a prison. It will restrain you. It will cause you to live a caged life that lacks maximum expression of power and strength. Now, when you look at a lion that is in a cage, you know those lions that are raised in museums and that are raised in cages and restrained places, there is a strength that lion doesn't have, that the lion in the wild has, because the lion is not created to live a caged life. The expression of the nature of the lion is determined by putting it in an environment that is not restrained. Now, the life of a man is not supposed to be restrained by fear. And anytime you open up the door of your heart to fear, what happens is that you live in a cage. There are expressions of masculinity that will not be able to come forth. There are expressions of your greatness that will be muzzled and that will not be expressed because you're living in a cage of fear. There is an expression of significance. There is an expression of masculinity and strength that you will never be able to have if you're living in the prison and in the cage of fear and intimidation. And then number three, how does fear emasculate us as men? It poisons our courage. It causes us to live in the prison of self-imposed limitations. And then number three, it leads to perversion. Show me a timid man, I will show you a man that cannot say no to perversion. Because there are times you doing the right thing will mean that you go countercultural, you will be misunderstood, you may be persecuted for doing the right thing. But if you're controlled by fear, then your love for comfort will be greater than your love for righteousness, and you will not be able to do the right thing under pressure if you are controlled by the spirit of fear. Fear will deform you, and it will cause you to easily yield to the spirit of compromise. It will cause you to easily. Show me a coward and I will show you a man that easily yields to compromise. Because anytime you want to live a life of morality, a life of integrity, and a life of dignity, there is a level of courage and confidence that will be demanded and required of you. So what are the four fears that shrink and sink men? Because that's the other thing that I want you to realize, that fear will never cause you to grow and expand. It will cause you to shrink, and it will never allow you to rise and to climb the peak of greatness as a man. It will make you sink in the valley of mediocrity. So what are the four fears that shrink men and sink men? Number one is the fear of man, what I call also the fear of rejection. This is a fear that enslaves the man who fears being misunderstood and being criticized. Now, let me say something important here for us as men that we need to understand. Anytime you decide to do anything of value, you must be ready to be criticized. You must be ready to be misunderstood. You must be ready to be looked down upon. You must be ready to be talked about. And you must be ready for even people who will attempt to intimidate you, to stop your journey, because they fear that you're finding your voice and they have not found theirs. The fear of a man will cripple you if you listen to the opinions of men more than you listen to the voice of destiny and the voice of significance that reverberates in your heart. If you listen to the voices of men, they will fill you with fear. There's a verse of scripture that I love that says, the fear of a man brings a snare. In other words, anytime you allow the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being criticized, the fear of being persecuted, and even the fear of being intimidated by men to control you, then you bring a snare on yourself. You trap yourself in your own fears, and you limit the expression of your masculinity as a man. The fear of a man, or the fear of rejection, is a great fear that limits men and causes men not to step out into the full expression of their destinies as men. The second fear that controls men and muzzles their expression is what I call the fear of failure. And why men fear failure is because we associate loss and we associate setbacks with something that dents our ego. And that's why there is no man alive that wants to be seen failing. I mean, I have seen men, maybe a man is walking in town and all of a sudden he's tripped by something on the walkway and he falls. And one of the things that you find is that most men will wake up quickly before any man notices. They will wipe the dust and continue with their journey. And it is the same thing that as we face life with the fear of failure, because we interpret loss as a liability and we tie to the loss of our dignity as men. The fear of failure will cause you to overestimate the possibilities of failure and underestimate the potential of success. And this is what you've got to realize, that failure is not such a bad thing after all. Failure is not an end. Failure is just a bend on the road to success. Failure gives you a new starting point so that you start your journey of success with a more educated disposition. So the fear of failure is the second fear that controls the life of many men. And that's why you find many men are sitting in passivity and they're afraid of starting something new. They're afraid of stepping out and asking for what they want in life. And I discovered something interesting in life. In life, you will not get what you deserve. You will get what you demand. And what you demand must be a demand that is informed by the desire for significance and not the fear of failure. Anytime you fear failure, you cage yourself in smallness and lack of initiative, and you will never rise up to the fullness of your destiny. The third fear that we face as men is the fear of the unknown. And let me tell you, you will never live in a state of life where you know the outcome of everything. There will always be something that you don't know, and that thing will attempt to put fear in your heart. You will fear falling sick. You will fear, losing your child. You will fear losing your job. You will fear your business going up in smoke. And the fear of the unknown is real. What we know as men we can deal with. It is what we don't know that fills the chamber of our courage with fear as we grapple with thoughts of what could go wrong and how it can potentially radically change our lives. There are men that fear getting a disease that is incurable. But I want to tell you something. The fear of the unknown is real, and you will never live long enough to know everything you need to know to conquer all your fears. You have to be comfortable with not knowing everything, and you have to be comfortable with managing your focus so that you are able to focus on what you can manage and not be controlled by what you cannot manage. And so the fear of the unknown is another fear that we face as men. The fourth fear that we face as men is the fear of inadequate capacity. And this fear is a question that we ask ourselves many times as men. Am I man enough? Do I have what it takes to face what life will confront me with? Do I have the capacity to be a good husband, a good father? And there are many times in life, especially when we are stepping up to a new level of responsibility, life will attempt to make us feel inadequate. We will feel like we don't have what it takes to deliver the goods in the moment of demand. And so the fear of inadequate capacity, if you're not careful, it will stop you. And that's why I love what the Apostle Paul said. Apostle Paul said he looked at himself, and many times he would look down on himself and look at his inadequacies and his weaknesses. But I love one statement that he made that changed the game plan of this man as a leader, as a game changer, as a culture shaper. He made one statement and he said, I may not have the sufficiency, but my sufficiency is of Christ. What does that mean? It means that even when I feel insufficient as a man, I can draw from the sufficiency of God and deliver in a moment of demand, because the sufficiency of God is able to kick in and give me the ability to rise up above my own insufficiencies as a man. And so those four fears are going to knock on the door of your heart as a man, and if you're not careful, they are going to stop you, and they're going to wrestle you on the ground, and they are going to limit the expression of your masculinity as a man. So I want to give you four quick things that can help you to manage and to muzzle your fears so that you don't live life from a disposition of fear, but you live life from a disposition of courage and strength. So what are the 4 things that are the antidotes of fear? What are the 4 ways? What are the 4 keys that we must press and the buttons we must press to awaken the lion within so that we face life from a disposition of boldness and strength? Number 1, if you're going to live above your fears, you must develop your faith. Your faith is the only voice that is strong enough to muzzle the voice of your fears. And what does faith mean? Faith means developing your confidence in God as a man, not your confidence in yourself, not your confidence in your abilities, not your confidence in your competencies, but your confidence in God and the backing of God in your life. What does it take to develop faith? To develop faith, you've got to hear what God says about your life as a man and align your life to what God has said about your life as a man. You don't live life by your opinions. You don't live your life by your own intellect. You live life based on what God has said about you as a man. If you don't listen to what heaven has said about you as a man, what earth is saying about you will intimidate you and it will emasculate you by filling your life with fear. You must feed the voice of faith until the voice of fear in your heart is drowned. By faith, we are able to rise above our fears, because at any point in your life, there are 2 forces that will contest for space in your heart. There will be the voice of faith and there will be the voice of fear. And the one that you feed is the one that will control your life. There is no difference between the situations that men face. The major difference is the attitude of their hearts in facing those situations. There are men that develop their faith and develop their ability to have confidence in God, even in a time when they feel intimidated by the situations they are facing. And there are men that allow themselves to be intimidated by their insecurities and their inadequacies. They fail to plug into the sufficiency of God. And so if you're going to conquer your fears, you must build your boldness by changing the voice you listen to. You must listen to the voice of faith and the voice of the word of God and the voice that affirms your greatness and your boldness as a man. You are a product of the voice you listen to. And the only way to put the voice of God in your heart is to feed your heart with the word of God. The number 2 thing that you must do if you're going to rise above your fears and to conquer your fears is you must not only develop your faith. Number 2, you must manage your focus. You must manage your focus. Fear is proof that your mind has been arrested by the wrong focus. And let me tell you something. Fear is more a mind game than we care to imagine. Anytime you allow your mind to be distracted by the things that make you feel undermined, what happens is that your mind opens the gate for the spirit of fear to find entry into your heart. You must learn to keep realigning your focus as a man to that which feeds your boldness and not that which empowers your weakness. Your mind is the gateway to your strength. You must feed your mind with stories that embolden your courage. That's why I love reading biographies, because biographies shows us what men did in their moment of fear and how they were able to rise up into new levels of courage. And how do you manage your fears? You manage your fears and you conquer your fears by feeding your faith. Number 2, by managing your focus. Number 3 is what I call developing fortitude. Any man that has a weak fortitude will never have strong courage. You must confront your fears, because any fear that you don't confront remains in charge of your life. Fear doesn't disappear by you hoping it will disappear. Fear doesn't go away by itself. Fear goes away by confrontation. I love something that I read somewhere about how they train people in the martial arts. They train you that no matter what kind of opponent that you're dealing with, never step back. Always take a step forward. Regardless of how intimidated and how fearful you feel, Fear does not disappear when you're passive. Fear disappears when you confront it, and like smoke, it disappears when you take action. Inaction will fuel your fears, but positive action will deflate your fears and cause them to disappear. In your moment of fear, don't sit down and feel sorry for yourself. Don't sit down and feel caged and intimidated. Step up, step out, and do something positive against the grain of your fears. And when you do that, guess what begins to happen? The well of courage will rise up within you, and you will find courage finding expression in your heart because you have overcome passivity. Number 4 thing that I want to challenge you as a man: if you're going to conquer your fear, if you're going to wrestle your fears to the ground, number 1, I've said develop your faith. To be faithless is to be fearful. To be faithless is to be full of intimidation and cowardice. You develop your faith. Number 2, you manage your focus. You manage your mind. Manage what you give attention to. When you give attention to the wrong thing, you can never create the right result. And then number 3, develop fortitude. Do something positive and proactive in your moment of fear. And then number 4, and the last thing that I'm gonna say is that you must develop a support system of courageous men. Fear is contagious. Fear is like a cold. Fear is like COVID. If you allow it, it will come into. You must live in an insulated space as a man, where you don't allow people who have been contaminated by fear to enter into your intimate space. You must guard your intimate space, because guarding your relationships is guarding your heart. Guarding your friends is guarding your heart. If you surround yourself with cowards, you will soon forget what it means to be a giant. If you put men around you that speak the language of cowardice, you will soon forget what it means to have the expression of courage. And so you must guard your social environment. You must allow your environment to be sanitized by allowing it to be filled by people who speak the language of courage. And the language of courage is contagious. When you put men around you that speak courageous stories of victory, stories of overcoming, guess what will happen? Faith will begin to rise up in your heart, and the voice of fear will be drowned by the voices of courage that you've surrounded yourself with. So 4 key things that you must do as a man if you're going to wrestle your fears to the ground and live life at the mountaintop of significance. Number 1, develop your faith. Number 2, guard your focus. Number 3, develop your fortitude, the ability to take action when you don't have the feelings. And then number 4, developing friends with people who speak the language of courage. And when you do those 4 things, guess what? You will stop being a defeated coward, and you will begin to be an overcoming conqueror, because conquerors are men of courage. They are men of confidence, and they are men that speak the language of faith and boldness. I do hope that as you do those 4 things, you will be able to wrestle the monster called fear. And we say that fear is a monster that stands between you and your royal place, that stands between you and the place of your significance. Remember, we said the crown of greatness does not fit in the head of cowards. The crown of greatness only fits in the head of courageous men. I do pray and believe that you will decide to be a courageous man, that you will make a decision to be a bold man, and that you will rise up and become a man that lives a life of boldness and courage, so that you can live in the mountaintop of greatness. I pray that you will join me next week. I have another exciting conversation with you that will take you yet a notch higher in the mountain of authentic masculinity. As you join us, I do believe that you're going to be blessed, you're going to be empowered, and you're going to be enlightened as a man to live life that is meaningful, that is successful, that is significant, and that embodies strength. Otherwise, may God bless you. May God keep you. We'll see you again next Saturday, God giving us the grace, and we will have yet another explosive time of exploring what it takes to be an authentic man. We'll see you then. God bless you.